Hey everyone, welcome to our Mimaki TxF300 tutorial on replacing the white dampers. You're going to need some Phillips screwdrivers, some swabs, some plastic gloves, some O3 liquid with a pipette that comes with it, and your 4 white dampers. Let's get started. First thing we're going to do is we're going to take the white dampers out of the box that they came in, and we are going to prep them for replacement. We're going to go ahead and take the white cover and the damper, and we're going to replace the top of the damper, the little white cover that comes on the top of that damper, with the one that comes in the box. First thing I want you to note is we never, ever want to touch the side of the damper that has the cellophane on it. We only want to grab the damper on the sides of the damper that do not contain the cellophane. Basically the skinny sides. We're going to take our white damper now and we're going to remove the white top that comes on it. Sometimes that comes off a little tough. Sometimes those little blue washers will come with it. If they do, just stick those blue washers back into the damper in the hole in which they fell out. And you put this white top back on it with the little clips facing down. Once I'm done with that, I'm going to set that down and I'm going to repeat that process on the next 3 dampers. Now, as I'm prepping these 4 white dampers, let's go over some of the things we're going to need in this process. We're going to need a garbage can that's somewhere near us so that when we take out the old dampers, as well as the garbage as you're seeing that I'm creating, we're just going to need a garbage can nearby so that we can throw all this stuff in. Vitally important. Give yourself enough room and space. Again, I can't stress enough when I'm doing this process, we want to make sure we're not touching the cellophane side. All right, once we've gotten our 4 white dampers prepped, we are now going to take some of that O3 liquid, put it into our pipette, and we're going to stick 1 drop of our O3 liquid into each one of those holes. This O3 liquid is basically providing lubrication for when we stick the ink tubes back into the damper and the damper onto the printhead. Now that we're done with that, we just put the O3 liquid back into the container and just tighten the lid back on. All right, now that we've got our white dampers prepped and ready, we are now going to prep the printer. So first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna turn that printer on. Once I've turned the printer on, I'm going to take my Phillips screwdriver and I'm going to remove the 2 nuts on the right side of the printer cover, and then there's 2 Phillips nuts on the left side of the printer cover. Please keep in mind the top left nut underneath the cartridges may take a short Phillips to get that one to remove. When we put those screws back on, that top one really only needs to be finger tight, so we're not having to really stress to get that removed. Then we just literally lift that faceplate up and remove it from the printer. Now we're ready to get the printer going. So the next step is we're going to hit our down arrow key and we're going to forward the film forward so that it covers the front heater. The reason why we're going to do this is this gets kind of messy, so we want to make sure that that front heater is covered. And then we're going to go into maintenance, station maintenance. And as the head comes out, we're now going to physically move it 2 to 3 more inches so it's more into the center of our film. So as we're making our mess, I don't get my ink anywhere. Well, then I'm going to take my Phillips screwdriver and I'm going to remove the head cover. Now actually comes the hardest part of this entire process, which is removing this bracket. What makes this bracket difficult is those little screws that are in the back. They have a tendency to want to fall down behind the print head, which we don't want to do because they're really hard to find if that happens. So if you happen to have a magnetized Phillips screwdriver, I would recommend using it in this process. If you don't, I have found that using my fingernail, once I've loosened it up enough, like you can see me doing here, to kind of hold that screw in place so it does not drop down, it's advantageous. Then once I've got this bracket loosened up and the screws removed, I'm going to go ahead and take that bracket completely off. Now, the one thing I want you to notice here is that I'm pointing at is there is a clear sheath that is covering the right side of the printhead. That clear sheath protects the ribbon cables because that's where the ribbon cables connect to the printhead. And in no way, shape, or form do we want ink getting down in there. That's a big no-no. Because if ink gets down into where the ribbon cables connect into the printhead, we have a possibility of losing our printhead. So the one thing I want you to take note here is as I'm covering over that area where that white or that clear sheath is, but then I'm also tucking it between the printhead and that cable that's right in front of the printhead, because that cable that's right in front of the printhead also has a connection that goes into the printhead, and I want to make sure that I don't get ink there as well. And then on the color damper or the color printhead, I'm doing kind of the same thing. I'm just kind of protecting that printhead from any ink getting into that clear sheath or around that clear sheath. Then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my towel and I'm going to cover up the photo eye or the laser eye, which detects the edge of the film. If I don't protect that, I'm at risk of getting some splash when the white hits the film or my paper towel of kicking back up underneath that print eye, and then I've got to clean that. Then I'm going to take a load of paper towel. I'm just going to stick it in front of the head. I'm sticking it in front of the head because when I remove the ink line from the white damper, ink is going to come pouring out of the bottom side of that damper. And I just want to make sure that I've got enough paper towel that I can absorb that ink. Now's the time to stick on my latex gloves and or nitrite gloves, whichever you prefer. Because at this stage, we may start getting a little inky or it gets a little messy. So The first thing I'm going to do is I am going to remove the far left damper. Now that far left damper, I'm going to pinch the front and back of that damper, and I'm going to move it forwards and backwards, and up all at the same time. And as I'm moving it forward and backward, forward and back and forward and backward, it will eventually kick loose from the print head, and you'll feel that. And then I just, again, continue to slowly work that damper up and out. The big thing I want to remember here is that that bottom of that damper always faces away from the print head so that I don't accidentally drip any ink near that print head. The other thing you want to take note of, which I was pointing at there, was the level at which all of the ink tubes go into the damper. You'll notice that they don't go all the way in. They're just slightly seated in. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove all 3 of the dampers on the right-hand side. I'm going to remove those, loosen those up, and remove those all together. It's way easier to take those dampers out if I'm doing them together. Now I have an option of, sometimes you'll see some white ink pooling at the bottom of the print head. So I'm not really cleaning the bottom of the print head. I'm really just putting that swab down there and soaking up any ink that I might find down there. This is an optional stage. You don't have to do it, but if you'd like to do it, feel free. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace the far left damper first. But I want you to take note is in the direction in which those dampers are. You'll notice that there's two little white squares on the top on the right-hand side and a big circle on the left-hand side. I want to make sure when I replace these dampers that those dampers are always in the same direction. If they're not all in the same direction in which I take them out, they won't work. So what you notice here is I'm taking the new damper, and I'm putting it more towards my palm, and I'm putting those old dampers that I'm removing out towards my fingers. And when I remove one ink line, then I'm putting it in the exact same place in my new damper. The biggest thing you want to remember when you do this is when I pull that first ink line out, ink will come pouring out like you saw in this video. White ink will come pouring out of the bottom side of that damper, and we want to make sure that we're putting that away from the print head. Once I'm done with that left one, I'm going to go ahead and set that aside, and now I'm going to start doing the 3 right ones, starting with the one on the far left. Again, holding that in my palm, holding the new one or the old one at my fingertips. I'm taking out the front ink line, putting it in the brand new place on the new damper in the exact same place. Just one ink line at a time, taking it out, putting it in the new one, taking it out of the old one, putting it in the new one. All wise paying attention that I'm pointing the bottom of the damper away from the print head and out over my paper towels. And again, I'm going to do each one of these moving from left to right of the far 3 right dampers. Again, taking note that every single damper has to be put in the exact same way, with the 2 right squares on the right side and the big circle of the damper on the left side. All 4 of your dampers must be put in this way, and they must match the dampers that are coming out. Again, as I'm doing this, you're noticing 1 ink tube at a time coming out of the old into the new. I always do this going left to right. Now I'm going to do the next one again, holding. If you notice, I'm only holding that damper by the pinchy ends or the skinny ends of the damper. I'm not holding that damper by the cellophane at all. Again, out of the old one, into the new one, and you can see ink just pouring out of the bottom of the old damper. Basically what that's doing is it's relieving pressure in the damper, and once I don't have negative pressure in the damper anymore, ink will just come flowing out of the bottom side of the damper. All right, once I've got all of my dampers done, I'm going to do this in reverse. I am going to take all of the dampers that I took out together on the right-hand side. I'm going to put them all back in together, but then I'm going to individually seat each damper. So now if you watch me here, I'm literally going to start from the right side, get it seated down into the print head, then the next one, then the next one. And you do that by pinching the little fingers on the front side and the back, and then working it forward and backward till it seats down into the print head. Then I'm going to do the one on the far left last, and I'm going to put that one in. Now the biggest thing here is I just want to make sure that all the dampers are level with each other. So once I know that one damper is fully seated down, I will literally compare it to the rest. Now what you're seeing me do is, this is just a precautionary measure, is I want to make sure that all of the ink tubes didn't come loose, or a ink tube didn't come loose when I put those dampers back in. So I literally just tap those ink tubes, the top of the ink tubes, with my finger, just to make sure that none of them came unseated. Once I'm done with that, I'm going to get rid of my paper towel, because obviously made a bit of a mess. And then I'm going to go ahead and clean that up. As I'm removing my paper towel, I'm just looking for any white that may have spilled where I don't want it, or gone somewhere I didn't want it. Start with the protector of the color head, then I'm going to take out the protector of the white head. And now I'm going to take note of, did ink go somewhere it wasn't supposed to go? So as I look at the print head, that's that clear sheath I was talking about where the ribbon cables go into the print head. I'm just going to check there, make sure I don't have any white ink there. I'm going to check where the cables go into the front of the print head to see if I got any ink there. Check the photo eye, don't see any there. Then I'm going to go and I'm going to check again where my ink lines go into my damper to see if I've got anything there. Once I'm done with that, I'm going to go over to the printer, and I'm going to put that bracket back on. This is the second hardest thing you're going to do. So what I recommend on this one, again, we start with the right side of the bracket first, because the left side has to go around all those cables, and it's really hard to put that in unless it's already somewhat in. So if you start on the right side, it's a little bit easier. I typically like to stick the screw through the bracket, then try to screw it into the mount. Makes things a little easier. But again, tricky part here is to not let those screws drop. If they do, again, they're very hard to find. All right, once I've got that print head cover bracket screwed back in and completely secured, there we go. I'm now going to go over to the printer, say that I'm done with my station maintenance, which, oh my God, if you look at my station, it looks horrible due to my white ink explosion from my dampers. Then I'm just going to clean up the film as best I can. After I've done all that, I'm going to turn my printer off. And then when I go to turn it on, I'm going to hit function 1 and function 3 and my power button, holding down function 1 and function 3 the entire time until you can see the firmware version on the screen, and then it'll beep. Once that happens, I can lift my fingers off of function 1 and function 3. And what this is doing, this is putting it into service mode. I'm putting it into service mode because I now need to tell the printer that I've replaced my white dampers. This is an important part of the process, because if I don't do this, the printer doesn't know I'm dealing with brand new dampers, and how it recirculates changes based on the age of my dampers. So once I've gone through my media detection, You don't necessarily have to do this. I don't even know why I did this in this tutorial, but we're going to work with it from here. All right, so once I've got my media detect, I'm going to hit menu, then I'm going to go down or scroll up to pound adjust, and then I'm going to keep scrolling down. Keep going, almost there. Stay on target until I get to replacement date. Once I get to that, I'm going to scroll down to white damper replacement. Then I'm going to select all, replace all, hit OK. You'll notice it'll be the date of tomorrow, not today's date. And then after I get done with that, I'm going to back it all the way out, and I'm going to turn the power off. I've now just reset the damper date on my printer. Once I'm done with that and it turns off, hopefully here soon, I am then going to turn the printer back on normally. All right, once my printer is back up and going, now I need to fill that damper. So I'm going to hit menu, I'm going to go to maintenance, and I'm going to go to fill up ink, but I only want to fill up ink at normal and then head 2. I don't want to fill up ink in my color head, just in my white head. And then I'm going to go ahead and execute. Now the cool thing here is when it starts filling up with ink, you actually get to see the ink go through the damper. It's actually kind of a cool thing to watch. And you can see the reservoirs of the damper filling up with white ink. Another thing to do during this process as it's filling up those dampers is I also want to check my ink tubes where they go into the damper, just to check for any type of leak that I might have. Like somehow I didn't set the ink tube into the damper really well. You can see the ink completely starting to fill up that damper. Kind of cool. Again, I just test it with my finger. It doesn't have to go in real hard. It's just making sure they're seated correctly. But if I visually don't see any ink coming out, I'm sure I'm fine. All right, after I do my white ink fill, the next thing I'm going to do is go to maintenance. We're going to go to white maintenance, and we're going to do an air purge. I've found that between doing a ink fill up and an air purge, it pretty much gets rid of any air that may be in those white dampers from doing an ink fill. And then once I'm done with that, and it's gone through that process, then I'm going to do my test print, my jet test, and see, and I just want to make sure, hey, I've got a clean test. All my jets came out good. And in this case, they did. If they didn't, I would highly recommend going and doing another air purge. Once I've got my clean test, I'm going to go ahead and put my head cover back on. And then once I get my head cover back on, I'm going to go ahead and put the printer cover back on. And that's it. Congratulations, you've just replaced your white dampers in your TxF300. If you guys have any questions in regards to what you've seen or have any issues through this process, feel free to reach out to us here at Blue Ridge at 704-815-6401.